Joining me now, Democratic Congressman from Connecticut, Jim Himes, whose district borders Newtown. Representative Himes, thanks for joining me on this very somber day. And I'm curious about the community. How's it doing a year later?
Well, it's obviously an extraordinarily somber day for those of us, well, for the country, of course, but for those of us who are particularly close to Newtown, as we think about the families reliving what happened ago. And of course, the town of Newtown this year sort of making a plea to be left alone, to grieve privately, and all of us to reflect on the progress that has or has not been made against reducing the amount of gun violence in this country. And of course, while Connecticut and New York and a number of other states have, put forward packages of gun safety measures, where I work at the federal level, the United States Congress, failure to really do anything at all. You combine all that, it's a pretty somber day up here.
Yeah, what kind of options do you have left for any federal gun reform?
Well, I remind people and of course people close to Newtown that this is not a problem that changes quickly, that there's a national conversation to be had so that people come to understand that most Americans respect Second Amendment rights, but there are commonsensical things that we want to do, like make sure that everybody who exercises those rights gets a background check to make sure they're not a violent criminal or a terrorist. We have a very overheated dialogue right now, fomented, frankly, by groups like the NRA, that make this a lot more of a polarized debate than it needs to be. But you know what? In the end, we prevail. It happened in the 80s. It took years for the Brady Bill to pass, which protected a lot of Americans. And one of the amazing things is that the Newtown families themselves, they understand. Those, poor people who should be most angered at our society's collective failure to act here actually understand that they need to sort of participate in an effort of steady application.
Yeah, but you and I both remember what it was like in the immediate wake of the shooting. If Newtown, in a sense of grief and urgency that followed, did not force gun control reforms, will anything?
Well, it will eventually, and remember, it's not today, of course, is a particularly somber anniversary here in Connecticut, but it's every week or every 2 weeks, that there's a Tucson.
It was yesterday, right? In Colorado just yesterday, in Centennial.
Just yesterday. I mean, it's just this, it's a steady drip of violence that over time, as people like the families of the Newtown victims get out there and continue stories. My good friend and colleague, Senator Murphy, who every Monday on the floor of the Senate reads the names of victims of gun violence that week. Great change and positive change in our society very rarely happens overnight. And unfortunately, the time that passes now means more innocent people dying, but it will prevail. We will eventually in this country get a much more sensible regime of gun safety measures and, frankly, better ways of identifying. Those who say mental health is part of the issue, they're exactly right. You read about Adam Lanza and his situation, you just say to yourself, this was a kid who desperately needed help and did not get it.
So what about reforms for mental health services? Where does that stand? Because these two issues really are inextricably intertwined.
They are, and I guess I'd say two things about that. The Affordable Care Act, which is so much in the news the last 3 months, one of the important things that it does, of course, is promote and require what they call mental health parity, meaning if you have an insurance plan, the mental health services that are available to you for mental illnesses have to be of a quality of the available services that are there for you for physical illnesses. And I think that's an important step forward. And, of course, there's something here that I think it doesn't have anything to do with legislation or with hospitals or with insurance, which is how we behave as parents and community leaders. Each and every one of us knows a kid who is alienated, who is isolated, who maybe doesn't have friends and whatnot. And of course, some tiny minority of those kids are ever going to do what Adam Lanza did. But it's probably incumbent on us to reach out, to do a better job as community leaders, as communities as a whole, to reach out to those people who are alienated and having trouble and try somehow to welcome them into our communities.
Yeah. Representative Himes, quickly before you go, I do want to ask about the budget that you voted for in favor of this week. Critics say this does not address the real causes of the deficit. Is the real virtue of this budget just that it avoids a government shutdown and more sequestration and gives us 2 years?
Well, the critics are right, and let's start with the good news first. The good news, of course, is that you had a strong bipartisan vote, in excess of 330 Republicans and who came together to vote for a budget deal. And things don't get more controversial in the United States House of Representatives than budgets. You had strong bipartisan support, a little more trouble in the Senate, but it's going to get done. So here, without a deadline, without a government shutdown, without threat to the debt ceiling, we actually, for the first time in many years, got a 2-year budget done, and that's a good thing. The budget itself, nothing to celebrate. It does not deal with the fundamental long-term issues that we face, particularly in our programs like Medicare and Social Security, which, ultimately do do need to be, in a fair and equitable way, put on a more sustainable path than they are. There's and problems in the tax code. There were all kinds of issues that we did not address in this budget. But as the saying goes, you gotta crawl before you can walk. And this is, of course, a much better place than we were 3 months ago.
Well, at least January 15th will come and go with government employees still on the payroll. Representative Jim Himes, good to talk with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
As the snow falls here in New York.